Hello and welcome to this season's final episode of Under the Dome, wrapping up with this year's legislative session. You can watch online at youtube.com/townmeetingtv or on Comcast channel 1087 or Burlington Telecom 17 and 217. And if you have a question for our guests, you can always call in at 802-862-3966 and we will get you on the air. Today we're joined by representatives from Williston. Let's go down between the two of you and you can introduce yourselves. Let's start with Jim.
Well, good morning. I am Representative Jim McCullough, serving the brave little hamlet of Williston, Chittenden 2, and I've been most fortunate to be selected by my town for the past 20 years as trusted representative and working for them and the state of Vermont. I always enjoy Channel 17 visits, and here I am again, my good fortune.
Great, thank you for joining us, Jim. And Aaron.
Hi, I'm Representative Erin Brady, also from Williston, the junior member, working with the wonderful Representative McCullough. I'm just finishing my very first term in the legislature, which has been quite a ride during the pandemic. I'm also a high school teacher, a school board member, a mom, and active in our community. So look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for joining us. And I think we'll start with you, Representative Brady. So you are on the House Committee on Education, that's right. And so your committee heard testimony on a few bills last week related to miscellaneous changes in education law, some of those kind of wrap-up bills at the end of the session. Can you describe those, or if you have any other work in your committee that you wanted to highlight?
Our committee has been very busy. In the first year of the biennium, we were particularly busy and took on some large measures like a new community schools bill to spend $10 million to allow schools to do more wraparound services within schools, and that work is now underway. In this past year, our committee worked really hard to be responsive to the reality in schools, which is that the pandemic has absolutely exhausted and stressed schools to the max. And so we were trying not to do anything new and to support our K-12 schools as best we can. So some of the work that we ended up doing this year in that vein, the one I'm most proud of is the universal meals bill. We did finally get passage of a bill to continue universal meals in schools. This is something schools have been doing during the pandemic for 2 years. So the opportunity to continue something that was one of the few bright spots of the pandemic was really, it was a really important thing for us to take on, especially at this time, so that schools wouldn't have to go backwards to a kind of broken system next year. So I was thrilled to work on that. I'm really glad that that my committee took the lead on that. That was one major thing that we worked on. And then there have been several other things that we needed to do. The biggest is probably dealing with our education funding system and updating how we allocate not really funds, but tax capacity in this state. And so that was the work of the weighting study that then came forward in the weighting bill this year. So that was also work that we did in looking at, how do we resource our schools and how do we account for the differences in students and the different needs they may have. So I'd say those are the sort of biggest things that the Education Committee dealt with. But as you mentioned, of course, there are lots of other miscellaneous items from higher ed to school mascots to school governance issues. So there's been other things that we have worked on, but have been trying in the House to be really careful that we aren't adding anything new to the plates of schools that are under just a tremendous amount of strain right now.
Right. Thank you. Jim, we'll go to you now. Same question. You're on the House Committee on Natural Resources, Fish, and Wildlife. Anything you'd like to talk about from your time on the committee this year?
Well, absolutely. And our committee, so I've been the luckiest boy in the world to serve on natural resources, fish and wildlife for 18 of my 20 years. And that's where I live in the natural world. And so how could I be so lucky? Our committee has played a an essential role in environmental justice bill, in the Act 250 reform, Act 250, the next generation, it's sometimes called, microplastics that are being ground up, or plastics that are being ground up and then ending up in soil amendments in our soils. And by the way, we eat 1 credit card of plastic a week through nanoplastics, which is the destination of all microplastics. And housing reform, several different housing reform issues, biodiversity legislation out of our committee, sponsored by our very forward-thinking chair, Amy Sheldon. We did current use reform, very, very important for helping to establish old growth forests in Vermont, which are very, very important. Part of our biodiversity and part of our carbon sequestration necessity. And the bottle bill, which I've only been working on probably for 6 or 8 years, along with Act 250 for 6 or 8 years. Not all of these bills have made it across the finish line, but those are important things that we did. Not in our committee, but if one were to ask, what's the most important legislation of the year? And I would say Proposal 5. We completed Proposal 5, the constitutional amendment process, which is a 2 biennium process. I should say biennia process. And now it goes for ratification to the people of the state of Vermont. Proposal 5, of course, is women, especially health of choice decision to make. And with the Roe versus Wade likely headed for a train wreck, many would think. Some would say, woohoo, but it's a train wreck the way it's going on right now. And 20 years ago, I certainly thought, it's good. You know, we're done with that topic. Oh no, and haven't been. Annually, it's been a discussion every biennium in our state house, up until this last 2 biennia, which of course it became a discussion with the constitutional amendment.
Right. Lots of things you named there. I think I might as well jump to one of these questions about, you know, the session's just wrapped up, and the governor had a few vetoes, one of which was as part of that climate bill that you mentioned. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about those vetoes and, you know, the attempts at override, and just, you know, any thoughts on that as the session wrapped up? And I think we'll start with Jim.
Well, you know, as an athlete, we all keep track of our personal records, and Governor Scott has a personal record as of a couple of weeks ago of 30 vetoes. He governs by veto. Governor Dean is a close second now with 25. And since that statistic of 30, I'm expecting at least another 2, 3 more, some of which emanated from my committee. So we shouldn't be looking for good reasons to feel bad, but the Act 250, the next generation, this governor says he wants to reform Act 250, but he's consistently voted against our Act 250 reform efforts, and urban legend has it that's going to be happening after it hits his desk in a week or so. That's a huge disappointment.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, do you have any thoughts?
It's just been an interesting process to be a part of. Obviously, we have a very strong Democratic caucus, and I can see leadership working really hard at all levels to reach consensus. I know in my committee, on almost every measure, not every one, but almost every bill we pass out of my committee is unanimous. And we work really hard to find consensus with the administration, to work out concerns among our committee. Again, not always possible, but almost always. So it's disappointing. I'm not in the room at that high leadership level, I think, where a lot of these negotiations happen, or at least not yet. But it's certainly disappointing because I think a ton of work does go into the process. Nothing is a surprise to anybody at the last minute, and the administration is an important partner in a lot of our policy work. So it's disappointing. The clean heat standard was particularly disappointing in terms of an opportunity to do something more aggressive on climate, but we will keep working, and I think that our caucus is strong, and we have and great leadership that will continue working with the administration to make important policies for Vermonters.
I think we'll continue through our questions here, and I think we'll start with Aaron, going to some of these more general questions. In your view, what issues are particularly important to communities in Williston?
Based on the feedback that I get largely by email during the pandemic, the issues, I did a quick count kind of this morning of what I, heard from constituents the most about. And I think over the past 2 years, the ones that rise to the top were the pension bill, and certainly concerns from our teachers and our state employees about how to be sure that our system is solvent for the future. As Representative McCullough mentioned, Proposition 5, I also received a lot of outreach on both sides, although the majority in support of Proposition 5, and wanting to ensure that we protect women's reproductive freedom here in Vermont. And I also heard a lot in this last couple of months on universal meals as we got close to the finish line on that. So those are some of the sort of top line issues that I got the most amount of mail and correspondence on, but certainly there are a lot of other issues that are more individual to folks. I really appreciated a couple families that reached out to me this year and really helped me understand our system and the challenges in our system for caring for adults with disabilities, and how our care systems fall short for those needs, and how we can do better in some of our social services. So some of those more niche issues, though, where I get a chance to really understand from somebody in Williston's perspective, really helped me have much better insight into the decisions we're making in the process. So those are some that rise to the top. I also know we have a very active climate group here in Williston that's doing great work, that's done some great work at the town level, and that's rightfully frustrated, at the state and national and international level of the amount of work we have yet to do. And I really appreciate their engagement as well.
Jim, same question for you. Issues particularly important to communities in Williston?
Well, I really feel that our Williston community is a very caring community, and as such, they're very concerned about housing shortages in Williston, housing prices in Williston, the inability for affordable housing to somehow get enough traction to be affordable for developers still, which those issues have really been brought forward in the various housing bills and in our Act 250 bill as well. Yes, many of our people who are retired and non-retired teachers and state workers very concerned about the pension. Proposal 5, I've heard a lot about that, and I've heard a lot about the clean heat standard, and which you sort of alluded to a little earlier this afternoon, and I guess I'd say the preponderance of people that contacted me about the clean heat standard might be people that would have generally said, yes, do it, please. But it's a good bill with a lot not to like, and one that I supported because it moves the ball down the field and is very important that we get underway. But as Aaron said, we start over again next year, and perhaps the process will be more inclusive, the clean heat standard, and we'll better understand why the opponents to various sections of it really don't like it and can speak to those issues in a better way. So, yeah, I think that's what's pretty much been, well, it's always education, taxes, and while not in Aaron's committee, came out of Ways and Means, but the new assessment for state aid to education is going to save $350 million for the aggregate of Vermonters. So that will fit well in Williston as well, I'm sure.
Right. So we'll keep going down the line here. Any issues that you are personally passionate about? I'm sure we've touched on a few already that you wanted to highlight. I think we'll start with Aaron again.
Oh, thank you. My passion is kids and families. That's why I ran. I'm thrilled to have been put on the education committee, where I come with some experience and background. And I was doing some kind of reflecting on the session last night, looking back through things. And my biggest concerns, I think, when it comes to kids and families are sort of the bookends of our system. We have a very strong K-12 system. It's not perfect. It's under a lot of strain with the pandemic. But I'm especially concerned in Vermont here with our supports for sort of birth to 5, the birth to pre-K group, the childcare shortages that we have, how we support young families, because so much important development happens in those years. So I'm really passionate about eventually doing more with our universal pre-K program. It's great that we have 10 hours, but would really like to see that expanded to be a more truly universal system. And at the other bookend of our system, I'm really concerned and passionate about our post-secondary access and options for our high school students. I'm a high school teacher, mostly seniors, and I've just seen far too many high school students who have, just a lot of challenges against them from their home, and that ends up dictating a lot about their future path. And so I really want to see us do more to make higher education, not just a 4-year degree, but some sort of credential, some sort of training, more accessible to more students, and ensure that more of our young Vermonters can really realize their full potential, hopefully here in Vermont, which would be good for our economy and our workforce, but also good for them. So I'm really interested in kind of, again, the bookends of our system, what we're doing for our youngest Vermonters and what we're doing for our young adults as they graduate high school and launch into the world. So that's work I hope to continue to do in future years. We've started to scratch the surface of it a little bit in my committee, but those are big projects.
Right. Yeah. Jim, same question. What are you passionate about and you want to talk about here?
Well, quickly first, we're not all so very lucky as Aaron and Jim to get in committees that we're passionate about. There are needs all throughout the building, and we get put where the speaker tells us, and we serve at the speaker's discretion. But clearly, Aaron is a bright star in the education committee, and so for myself, with all the, so I'm going to say I'm passionate about equality. You go, what? Where does this fit in here? Well, I became a representative in 2002 because I was not happy with the way the Williston representation voted on civil unions. And I said, what? You're out of here. Thank you very much, Williston voters. That turned out to be true. And we got civil unions, we got marriage equality, had to override Governor Douglas's veto on that one, and we're successful. But what does that have to do with today's discussion? It is Proposition 5. or proposal 5, I beg your pardon, and it is environmental justice. And environmental justice is all about equality too. We've got Vermonters in all but 4 towns, I think 4 in the state of Vermont, that are in compromised communities, that have compromised communities for environmental justice. And where's the equality in that? And think of for instance, the poor people, the poor families in Williston and South Burlington that are practically in the jet blast of the F-35. And that's a poster child for environmental injustice. And to no fault of their own, that airplane arrived here. So environmental justice, Act 250 reform, which I've been working, and so environmental justice, I played a part as, as a committee member, for sure, but a big shout out for Representative Terry Dolan from Waitsfield, who carried the big load for our committee on that bill, and she did an awesome job, and I think we ended up with a good bill between the two bodies. Act 250, I knew Governor Dean C. Davis personally. Yep, I'm lucky to be that old. And Act 250, he did it. And he did it in a very different environment, legislative environment that we've got now, if you will. A lot more. So at any rate, he did it, and it hasn't been reformed. And we really, really, really need to bring that bill into compliance, if you will, with climate change. We need to bring it in compliance with I'll say climate migration, as people are moving out of NYC, Boston, Cape Cod, you name it, to come to Vermont, sight unseen, pay 50% more for the house because they got to get out of Dodge down. They can't stand it down there, and because of the climate. You know what? Climate migration for all of our wildlife and our plants. We just need to move forward with some real change. And I've been working on that bill for 8 years. Things don't just happen in the dark room at the 11th hour, people. It takes a long time for good stuff to happen. So those are the things I'm most passionate about. The Act 250 passionate piece. Also a shout out to housing needs. Mm-hmm. Being able to develop, build, and move into housing people of all socioeconomic rights is a real issue, and I'm passionate for that as well.
Right. So we have about 5 minutes left here, and I have a bit of a closing statement here for the end of Under the Dome. So we're limited on time, so I want to give each of you a chance to just give some closing thoughts, thoughts about this session, and hopes for next session. And I think we'll start with Erin.
Thank you very much. It's been an incredible honor. It's been an incredible experience. It was all like this for the first year on camera and on Zoom, and being in the building and building relationships with people, really understanding the process has made me a much more effective legislator. So, I'm honored that I had that opportunity this past year. I've been honored that the chair of my committee has given me some great leadership opportunities. And, there's always much more work to be done under many of the issues we've talked about, but I think we've made some really important progress for Vermonters this year. I think that, as Representative McCullough mentioned, perhaps the most important vote I cast was for Proposition 5, not knowing how important it was, but not knowing just what situation we would be in right now today, as we see the likelihood of Roe versus Wade being overturned. And in terms of pragmatic policy and tax policy, I think that the work that our chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Janet Ansell, did to put together a child tax credit is the thing I am most proud of supporting in my caucus and the work of my colleagues. Modeled after the federal tax credit, they worked on a fabulous compromise that will allow families with children 5 and under to receive $1,000 tax credit based on income. And research is so clear that one of the importance of what happens in the early years and the importance of money and the terribly detrimental effect of poverty. So that progressive policy that came with several other really fantastic tax changes that I won't go into, I think is one of the things I'm most proud of the overall work we did as a body this year. And I look forward to doing more of that kind of work, hopefully in the future.
Great. Thank you, Representative Brady. Jim.
So what a lucky boy for 20 years to have the voters of Williston just say, we trust you, Jim. And I call it the real University of Vermont, where we have an incredible opportunity to learn. And our electorate, our people of Williston, the people of the state of Vermont have had an incredible boost because of COVID. Now 630,000 people can visit the legislature every single day we're in session and make their choice of which committee they want to sit in and watch and listen to and mix and match those up because of this new protocol we're using right today. And I expect that that's going to continue into the future as the new rules get developed for next biennium. I'm going to just leave with saying many of my Willistonians recognize good government is a participation sport, end quote. And then don't just sit there, talk to your representative. And this boy listens, even if he doesn't agree, he replies. And it's important, even if when people do agree with you, that they tell you, because we need that kind of support as well.
Right.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Representative McCullough. Thank you both for joining us. This has been fantastic to have you on. And thank you to the audience for tuning in to Under the Dome. This is our final show this season. Thank you to all of our legislators who took their time out of their busy schedules to join us. Under the Dome may be taking a break, but our general election coverage is coming up fast. Look out for our first debate of the season this Thursday at 7 p.m. with Democratic candidates for U.S. Congress, an event co-sponsored with Burlington Young Professionals. You can watch this and other local political coverage on our website at cctv.org, our YouTube channel, or our channels Comcast 1087, Burlington Telecom 17 and 217. Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much.